Hello, this is Anna Imagination. We are taking a look into culture at this point. It's something that's been on my mind all my life, literally. So I grew up without a culture. And this is something where I've had fights and wars about this. And this is where I am officially making space for this. And I'm telling everyone, back the fuck off. And that's just, I got to get that out there. So my fight for culture has been one that I have literally taken beatings for. I have bled for this fight. I am white. I am not English. I am not American. I am white. White is not a culture. There's no art. There's no language. There is no hobbies, traditions, nothing. Everything that is in my culture was stolen or borrowed from other cultures and weeded out for white supremacy. It's not a fucking culture. If I were to give a name to any of my cultures, it would be racism. That is my culture. Yeah, that is my culture. I was raised in a racist culture, but ethically, that is not who I am. And the entire white culture that I was raised in, first of all, was in denial of being racist. They were in denial of being white supremacists. And if you did not follow their behavior of racism, you were an outcast. Everybody in my town was white. I never even saw a pair of brown eyes ever. To me, brown eyes are amazing. Because they're just so different. And I found out later that brown eyes are the most common color in the world. That is how white supremacist my culture was. So when I think culture, I'm thinking dances, music. I'm thinking languages, art. I had none of it. What we had was racism. And because there were no other people around except white people, it was really low key until someone of a color or a different race came into the mix. As soon as they came into the environment, the comments that have always been there that I did not notice turned way up. They just turned up the volume. Within a few minutes, a few hours, a few weeks, the person would leave, move out of the town completely, and we'd never see them again. And then they would turn down the volume of the racism. So it was there, peppered in what I heard all around me always. And as soon as one of them entered the perimeter, the racism would turn back up on the volume. I saw this most with my grandfather. So a few of my cousins and I, who started to get the ethic of this is wrong, started to fight against it. What we ended up getting was significant rage. There was a schism in the family, and we became outcasts. So if you weren't racist, you were an outcast. The few people, and I do mean two, Black people in the entire town of 2,000 plus people, received so much abuse that all I could do was give them my kindness and my friendship. And I did. They received my kindness and my friendship. Now, and I don't know why, I don't know how, but my aunt adopted a Black girl. And I'm still trying to figure that one out. I have no idea how or why. And yes, she had brown eyes. And it was amazing to me. Yeah, the consistency was, it's as inconsistent as it sounds. Like my grandfather loved to use the N word, and his adopted granddaughter was Black. Like none of this made sense. These were not smart people. So it wasn't until I got out of this culture that I realized how racist I had been raised. And I do not understand the struggles of people who have to deal with racism. I dealt with feminism. That's what I got to deal with. I got to deal with another type of thing that doesn't have a name for it. It's a, we're going to hate you because you're not racist kind of a thing. It's a, you're allied to them, you're a fucking whatever, fill in the blank. So I don't have a name for it. It doesn't exist in our culture, but it's a very real thing. And that puts me in a position where I'm an outsider to people with a culture, and I'm an outsider to people who are racist, and I'm an outsider to my own family. So we're in the cracks. I've talked to a few other people who experience this. They were also white, who were raised in a white supremacist culture, and they have the same problem, where they're going, yeah, we're between the cracks. And the best way to explain it as is white people who are allies, white people who are allied to those who struggle with racists. We've fallen into the cracks, and we have nowhere to go, we're nothing. We're nothing. We don't understand the plight, and we certainly don't want to be insensitive to them. We don't understand them. We can't. That's not what we suffer, any more than they can understand what it was like to be us. Furthermore, and this is the worst part of it, is their disgusting filth was raised and groomed my head. So now I have to figure out what part in my head is racist and how to remove it. But I have no metric to go by, because the people I have for role models are racist fucks. So I'm going, they're not my people. So I've disowned my people because I can't stomach their lack of ethics and their racism. I certainly can't put myself in a culture that I can't identify with, because I don't understand the horrors of racism. That's not my fight. I ally with them. So now there's this group of people that's just there, and we just have no word for it, and we have no culture for it. We are literally without a culture. So my mother is Irish. If I were to put any kind of culture on my family, it would be American English and American German. But the food was American English and American German, and their pride was a bunch of racist motherfuckers. There's just no other word for this. They were filth. And the amount of hatred toward my mother's Irish culture, we weren't the right kind of white. That's how racist they were, that you weren't the right kind of white. So my mother's Irish culture was intolerated. They had no tolerance at all for the Irish culture, even though that's the one that I gravitated toward, even though that's the one where I went, those are my people. So when my mother tried to provide us with the Irish culture, I took beatings for it. And I was told that I'm not Irish. There was a whole lot of hell going on with that. And it was extraordinary to watch. It was my father's family and my mother's family. And my father's family was dominated over, this is our culture, this is our family, you're not allowed. So it was understood that when my mother married my father, she also had to divorce her culture. And we were raised under my father's culture because she wasn't the right white. I can't sit there and say, yeah, I understand what racism is like. I don't. This is unnamed. This is just a thing that is in our culture that's unnamed. And what I want to really do is focus on what it's like living without a culture. First of all, it feels like this massive void. It feels like this emptiness. And it left me in pursuit of a belonging, of a clan, and of a home my entire life. And every time I gravitated closer toward the Irish culture, I was denied it, invalidated, beaten in some cases, told that that's not who I was. It took me 40 years to get out of that racist white supremacist culture. And the very first thing I did when I got to New York City was go right into an Irish bar. And that's what drew me. And those are the people that adopted me. I went on a massive walkabout. I had 4 years. That was 2020. Here it is, 2024. And I was back in an Irish bar yesterday, and I could feel like it felt like I walked home. It felt like I'd been gone from home for 3 years, and I was home again. And I was greeted with the same warmth, the same Kim, and the same old struggle of my brother telling me, you don't belong there, you're not allowed to be there, those aren't your people, immediately rose up. And taking this massive step back and just looking at this cultural crack, and I guess that's the best way to explain this, is it's literally a cultural crack where there is a space for some people where they don't have clan, they don't have home, they don't have belonging, they don't have culture. And when you don't have those things, it's a massive loss of your identity. You have no point of origin. And that's really what this comes down to, is your identity is literally gone. You just have no point of origin. Now, my energy, if I were to just follow what my energy says, my intuition and my energy pulls me so strong to Ireland. And every time I gravitate toward her, I have this abuse in my head denying me. So I have this internal war of my brother's voice and where my intuition and my energy tells me I feel I belong. Same thing with New York City. It took me 40 years and I had to fight tooth and nail to get here. And now that I'm here, I'll be talking to some people and I'll be saying to them, common question here is, oh, are you from New York? And it's not an easy question. It's a highly traumatizing question, because from New York, no, I had to bleed and fight and take literal abuse for 40 years that kept me away from here. So am I from New York? No. Have I earned the right to be here? Oh, you bet your fucking ass I did. And there is almost an evaluation of, are you a native, or are you visiting, or are you a transplant? And that's really what they're trying to get to. But the question is absolutely void of any acknowledgement that some people don't have the luxury of being born where they belong. Some people don't have the luxury of being born into a culture. Some people are born without family, without clan, without culture, and without city. So when they choose a place where they belong, it's their heart home. And I've actually taken to calling it a heart home, which means I had to bleed and fight to get here, and this is where I belong. Don't ask me any further questions. And it's a phrase that I started writing more and more about regarding the heart home. So my heart home is Ireland and New York City. And it's been my heart home all my life, since I was an infant. And it's very different than anything else, because they want details, they want elaborations, they want the story. And it's not a pretty story. It's one that, to this day, when people ask me where I'm from, I feel like I'm being invalidated. I feel like I'm being threatened. I feel like I have to defend my choice of being here, because for 40 years I had to fight to be here. And the war is over, but the memory has not yet faded. It's still too close to it. So I came up with a phrase, literally, I'm from everywhere and nowhere. And that gave me the safety of, I don't have to answer that question. They know now not to ask it. And I don't have to explain myself. And that's really that question, where are you from? For me, it feels like an explanation of myself, because that is exactly what it has been for 40 years. And trying to find a way around this, and especially, I'm going to say it again, in New York City, you can't go a day, you can't go an hour without somebody saying, so where are you from? And it's very much the tourist in the city. Is there are so many people who are visiting in out of the city so much that you just, are you here to stay? Are you visiting? How should I attach myself to you? Or are you going to be gone tomorrow? And that's a lot of it. And it's really, they're trying to evaluate if they can invest and settle down with you as a friend, or if you're a fleeting passing moment. But putting this in a perspective where it's almost like I want to jump right to the end and say, I'm here to stay. Like this is my home and I'm here to stay. And it's okay, you can attach yourself to me. I'm not going anywhere and I'm off the N train. And that's really what they want to know. They want to know what the subway commute really looks like. But there is this assumption that just, oh, everybody's got a culture. And it's one that I've thought my whole life over is, oh, well, you've got a culture. It's racism. That's the culture I was raised in. It's racism. No, I don't have a culture. If I were to say I've got a culture, it's white supremacy. That was my culture. That's not my culture. That's not my culture. So it's this really, it's horrific. It's really fucking horrific. And I did a lot of research when I was looking at people who are raised in cults, like Jeff Warren's. And they struggle with this, where they've escaped the community and people ask them questions. And the biggest and the hardest part of all of this is the denial. The people within that culture really don't think that there's a problem. They don't realize they are so ignorant that they don't even know they're white supremacists. They don't even know that they're racists. They're that ignorant. And I'm sitting here on my end of life now, literally trying to learn how to remove all this racist shit. It's in the little subtle statements, the little subtle thoughts. And every time I have a thought on something, I ask myself, is that racist? Because I don't know. I have no metric because it's been honed around white supremacy. And ironically, my partner is Puerto Rican. Well, Puerto Rican heritage. So getting, like, he's helped me a lot with this. And it's been a real horrific challenge to overcome, of literally doing a racial cleanse. It's a racist cleanse. That's a really good word for it, is doing this racist cleanse. I was speaking to somebody a few years ago about this, and this is the person who fell in that white crack. He was dating somebody who was of a different nationality as well. And so we were both in a interracial or mixed racial relationship. And he was the white person in his relationship. And we were talking about it. And we're like, it is an undefined, untalked about, unknown struggle that people in our position really battle. And we're allied, but we don't have, and we certainly don't want to build a culture over this, but we also don't have a place to belong. And what's happened is we don't know how. We want to be taught. This is a big deal. We want to be taught how to cleanse this racial thing from us. But finding someone to teach us, non-existent. That literally we cannot. This is a high demand. I cannot tell you enough how much of a high demand this is we are actively seeking people to teach us how to not be racist, because we don't want it in us, but we were taught it. And every time I open my mouth, I question, was that okay to say? Was that inappropriate? And I have no idea. So it's literally one of the things that I'm looking to put together in my Alexandria is literally people who would be willing, people of color, who would be willing to teach others how to not be racist. And the problem that I found is people of color, people of different cultures, it is such a painful topic for them that to have to go through it and groom it is absolutely traumatic for them. And so it's finding somebody who's willing and able to go through this, to teach us how to get rid of this thing that was put into our minds. And it's downright, oh my God, it is not easy. So Yeah, it's so fucking hard. And yeah, this is going to be like my next task is like they're see, one of the big things that a lot of people go after is don't make generalizations. But then you get into a culture, and I'm going to use the Irish culture as an example, is they make generalizations all the time. Like one of the things, I'd made a comment, I was interviewing somebody yesterday, and she was telling me how warm and how much easier it seems to be for Irish to invite people into their culture. And when they do this, they are, she's like, we know how to connect with people. And I mentioned social anxiety, and she goes, oh, we have social anxiety, but they still know how to connect. They know how to overcome and manage the social anxiety to connect. And she said to me, there's nothing a few Guinness won't take care of. And we both laughed. Now, I'm looking at that going, if I'd said that about a different culture, would that have been coming off as racism? I don't think we know what racism is. And it's, and I'm saying this from my point of view. So, and this is something else. I was watching Big Bang Theory. Now, Big Bang Theory is written by a white man, and one of the characters is an Indian. All the racial Indian jokes were being done by the by the Indian actor. Now, you had 4 white people, if you count Penny, plus this Indian. You had a Jew in there as well. And the Jew was making all the Jewish jokes. The Indian was making all the Indian jokes. But it was written by a white man. So I'm going, is this a white man making Indian jokes? But because he dressed them in an Indian face, it was okay? A white man making Jewish jokes, but because he dressed them in a Jewish face, it was okay? Let's take a look at, why are the actors consenting to this shit? Why was the Indian actor consenting to mock his own culture? Why was he allowing himself to be used as a puppet? Why was the Jewish actor consenting to be used as a puppet for this white man's racial jokes? And it's this massive, oh, I'm going to dig into this. I'm going to dig so uncomfortably into culture and racism. We're all going to squirm. We're all going to squirm, because getting to the heart of this and coming with my point of view, where I am of this cultural crack of, I've seen racism. It's fucking disgusting. I remember, I can't tell you how many times I have cried with others after witnessing what they've endured, just as a witness. And there's trauma in witnessing racism. And that's another thing we don't talk about. There's the trauma of enduring it, which I can't understand. I understand misogyny, and that's something I can talk about. But witnessing it is a whole nother thing. And that's something else that's not talked about. And the real question when you dig into these is, it's just hate, isn't it? It's just hate. If you look at what's really being done, it's hatred. And there are some people who accuse you of this hatred. When you're just ignorant. And there's some people who just accuse you of this hatred when you stand up for yourself. It's hatred that's been weaponized. Weaponized hatred. And there's direct weaponized hatred. There's retaliation of weaponized hatred. There's passive aggressive weaponized hatred. It's weaponized hatred. There was this moment, my daughter was on the bus and she had candy. And this girl was really mean to my daughter. She was just unethical. She called her a bitch. And my daughter did not get along with her. So when my daughter was eating candy, the girl said, "Give that to me." And my daughter said, "No." And the girl said, "It's because I'm black, isn't it?" My daughter came home crying, angry for being accused of racism. My daughter said, "I didn't give it to her because she was black. I didn't give it to her because she was a bitch." I had a friend, very wonderful man, loved him to pieces, but he loved to tell a joke. He would look at white people and go, "It's because I'm black, isn't it?" It wasn't funny. Being accused of weaponizing hatred is abuse. And weaponizing hatred is abuse. And retaliating with weaponized hatred is abuse. And I do believe those are the three types of it. It's just weaponized hatred. And I don't want to use the word racism anymore because I have endured weaponized hatred for being a girl. And I have endured weaponized hatred for not being the right fucking shade of white. And I have endured being accused of weaponized hatred after having to watch it on people I care about and people I don't even know. And I really wish we could just call it for what it really is at this point, that it's just weaponized hatred. And there's direct weaponized hatred, retaliatory, and the accused, falsely accused. And I just want to start calling a duck at this point. Having hatred is one thing. Having fear is one thing. But weaponizing it is a whole nother thing. There's also passive aggressive weaponized hatred. Passive aggressive weaponized hatred. That's where you see those Indian jokes being told by an Indian actor that were written by a white man. Passive aggressive weaponized hatred. That's fucking disgusting too. Thank you so much. May the kindest of words always find you.